Hey, everyone, and welcome to Hereticals. I am Chris, also known as Atheist Pastor. Once again, I'm off camera. Got a pretty good excuse for that again. I'm not looking that great today. Bit of a crazy morning here. It's bucketing down with rain, and unfortunately, when you've got kids, you've got to get to school, and you tend to you just get a little bit behind. So, I haven't had time to pretty myself up. And anyone who's seen me knows that for me to look even halfway decent does take a fair bit of time. But anyway, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the ongoing saga that is Atheist Alliance International and John Richards. So, for those who don't know, John Richards appeared on the Free Thought Prophet podcast the other day, probably about 4 or 5 days ago. Obviously, depending on where you are in the world, it was, could have been an evening, could have been a daytime thing. Not too sure on the exact day, but it was about 4 or 5 days ago, where he went through, I guess, his version of what had gone on and, I guess offered his rationale behind things, kind of danced around a few things. I don't think he really answered too much, but we're going to talk about some of the points that he brought up, about what happened back in 2017. And because I'm someone who, I don't always like to look at the negative, I think that we can look at the positive as well. I'm going to offer some solutions for how AAI can actually fix the problems that they've got and move forward, in a reasonable way. But we'll get to that. So first, let's talk about to John on the podcast the other day. I'm just going to assume most people who are here have probably already heard it. If not, I will put the link in later for people to go and watch it. But you'll probably be able to work out the TLDR from what I'm going to say. So there's two ways of looking at what John Richards said. So the first is if we believe what he said, and the second if he's maybe, taking some liberties, making a few things up. If it's a case of he's rewriting history to suit himself, well, then you can only say that there was nefarious things involved. There's a lot of assumption there. There's no proof to that. And look, that isn't even necessarily my opinion. What I think has happened is it's a case of, if we are to believe everything John Richards said, he was told something and he just kind of went along with it. Now, he said that he was told by Bill Flavelle and Gale, who was the president at the time, that it was in big trouble and there was all these issues and it was on the verge of bankruptcy and collapse. And as a result, he got involved and just sort of went along with things. Now, the issue with that is there's no due diligence. If you go onto a board, especially a board of an international organization, with the stature that AAI had, you don't just take people's word for it. If someone says it's going bankrupt, you ask the question, okay, well, what's the situation? If I'm coming onto the board where you're a director and potentially have liability, you want to know these things. You need to say, okay, well, what's the situation? What are the finances? How much is in the bank? What's the incomings? What's the outgoings? What are the projections? Before you start voting on things. It's simple. I think it's a case of, at worst, it's corruption, which I don't think it is. At best, I think it's incompetence and a lack of due diligence. Now, John Richards isn't an unintelligent person, and he's held positions, that would, indicate that he knows how these, organizations work and what due diligence is, how their structures go. He served as a councillor on the council in his local area. He was an elected member. So he's not an idiot. But in this case, in my opinion, he hasn't asked the right questions. And if we're to believe him, he's been lied to about the situation. Now, let's look at the situation in 2017. So the issues that John brought up for why special measures needed to occur, and we'll get to special measures in a bit, but let's look at the issues first. So, finances. Now, John didn't know what the finances were when he was quizzed. We've seen that twice now over on his channel and on the Free Thought Profit podcast. But what we do know is there was roughly, and we'll use roughly, about 50,000 in the bank. Now, John said that there was about 10,000 outgoing. It was actually 17 out that went out in, or these are all approximates, in 2017. So he didn't know what the actual finances were. So if we look at these finances, 50,000, even with 17 going out because they had to spend all this money, even if you assume that, it's going to go backwards about $10,000 per year, there's still 4 years worth of funds there and finances there and plenty of time to rescue things. Okay, so we'll move on to the next thing. The Indian blogger, I really have an issue with this because they keep going on about this Indian blogger being paid $6,000 for a year's work like it's some big thing. That's so much money for someone in India. Simple. You pay someone, you're an international organization, it doesn't matter if they're in India, the United Kingdom, the US, or Zimbabwe. You pay them the same amount. You don't say, well, we're only going to pay you X amount because of the country you're in. Doesn't work that way. Incidentally, I am going to keep an eye on the chat as best I can, and we'll see. John Hamill's actually just put something interesting in that I would like a little bit more clarification on. He's asked how much of the 17K went to Bill Flavel's kids. That's a pretty big claim. I'd be interested if to find out a little bit more about that if there's something there. Okay. So with getting back to the Indian blogger. Now, the Indian blogger's removed from this role. And who takes over? John Richards, in the role that he wanted to take over. So I guess the question I'm going to ask is, was John Richards promised the role prior to him coming on board? Was he told that this was something he would be taking over? Because he seems to have been the affiliates director for a very brief period of time, just long enough to get on the board, do a few things, and then he's taken over the magazine. It doesn't pass what I call the sniff test. All right, so the website redirect, going to porn sites. Look, the website got hacked. An atheist website got hacked. Really not surprising. Websites get hacked all the time, but that doesn't mean that you need to completely revamp a website. As far as it not working on devices, there's plugins for most things that can do it. It's actually a really not a difficult and not an expensive fix. So, it's really not that difficult. The database. So the database was an issue he brought up. It was too complicated and too much for them to use. Too expensive. Look, $300 a month for a database for an international organization isn't really that expensive, especially if it's got a lot of features that you probably do want to use at some point as you're growing your membership. Now, why would someone not just get in contact with the company that operates the database? All of these companies, because they want to keep your business, have training. They will tell you how to use it. They will help you with the product. Why did this company not just get contacted about doing that, offering some training? I mean, from what I can see, they were still able to send emails out because people were getting emails. There was emails that went out. So once again, I'm calling bullshit on that. It's just doesn't add up. So low membership, apparently John said the membership was in decline. There was nothing that they could do. It was about to collapse. Well, this is because the renewals weren't sent out. People didn't know how much they had to pay. You can't be financial if you don't get an invoice, especially if it's not a set fee every year. If there's different places that have different, or different organizations will have different fees, and we've been over this a little bit because, if you're an atheist organization in Iran, you're probably not going to have any membership fee attached, because if you're transferring money to Atheist Alliance International, you're going to have some issues in a country like Iran. Whereas if you're American Atheists, a large organization with plenty of funding, you would expect that it would be a higher figure. But if you don't send out renewals, how can people pay? In my opinion, it's an ideal situation if you want to stack a vote. Another thing that was brought up was there was a low board, no number of members on the board. That's an easy fix. You appoint people to the board, which is what they did. But then you still have to have an election. So what should have happened back in 2017 is the board then should have written to all the members and it said, here's the problems we've got. Go through everything. Go through the website's got these issues. We're having some challenges with the database. It looks as though there's a lot of members who haven't renewed, and we don't have enough people on the board. Ask for help. You know what? When you've got multiple organizations and multiple members, you can assume that there's someone who's probably pretty good with issues to do with hacking that can probably help with the website, or someone who might even be prepared to say, hey, I can convert this to a mobile, to be mobile friendly for you. And I'll do it either at a cost price or for next to nothing. Or you might have an organization or one of the larger organizations that says, hey, we've actually got a department or people who can do that for you. Let us help. Because that's what happens with organizations like this. People help out. It's really not that difficult. So anyway, that was 2017. Let's talk about today, because unfortunately, one thing we can't do is we can't go back in time. We can't, we don't have a time machine. We can't actually go and fix what happened back then, but we can try and do our best to fix it right now. Now, what I've done is I've had a look at the situation and where things are now. Now, first thing I'm going to say is I'm not familiar with the bylaws. I haven't read through the bylaws. So if there's anything that doesn't match a bylaw from either now or 2017, I apologize. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually offer a solution for how AAI can actually move forward and get past this, because I think it's important. AAI, we need AAI, and we need a strong AAI that doesn't have this kind of controversy surrounding it. We need AAI to be able to go into the United Nations on our behalf. We need AAI to go and fight for a lot of atheist organizations and a lot of atheists around the world who aren't in the privileged position we are in the Western world. We need someone standing up for secular rights on that international level. We need someone who can bring these groups together. Now, I guess to give you a bit of an idea on my background. So I have run organizations. I've run not-for-profits. I've won awards. I've come in and rescued a few organizations that were on the verge of collapse and low membership, and sort of got them sorted out and then been able to sort of pass them on and move on. I've won state level awards in New South Wales, which is a state of about 8 million people, the largest in Australia. So I know that especially Americans think of Australia as this backward place in the middle of nowhere. Well, there's about 25 million of us. We're not too small. But I've got a background in this. I've sat on boards. So I understand how these things work. So this is the advice, and this is what I would do if I were to come in and try and fix AAI today. So the first thing that the current board needs to do, now whether we recognize that they are a legitimate or non-legitimate board, is going to be put to the side, because hopefully everything that happens here will fix that. First thing they need to do is hold a meeting. Where they're going to go through a lot of the points that I'm going to bring up. Now, the first thing that needs to happen is they need to grant a temporary 4-month membership to all affiliates with voting rights from 2017. Now, this is a free membership, and the reason is because they need to acknowledge that there were issues at this time, and there were members that may have left because of these issues. So a temporary membership is granted to all affiliates from 2017, and this is with voting rights. Then what you do is you write to all of the reinstated affiliates, as well as your current affiliates and members to advise them what's going on, but you let the reinstated affiliates know that they've had their membership reinstated. If they don't wish to have their membership, they need to advise in writing within 1 month, and you let them know exactly what's going to happen. Now, in 1 month, a special meeting needs to take place where elections will be called. Now, nominations will take place at this meeting and for a 2-week period afterwards. So all positions are vacated and nominations occur. So the current board, once again, whether legitimate or not, acts in a caretaker mode until the election, which is pretty standard for most organisations. And once again, voting rights to all affiliates current and from 2017, and unless they have advised in writing that they don't wish to be associated. So 2 weeks after this election is called, you've got your 2-week nomination period. You then have a 2-week period where voting can take place, which would be conducted by an independent auditor. Now, the independent auditor would collate the votes, and then at the conclusion of the voting period, which was 1 month after the special meeting, you have an AGM where the results of the vote are announced. The new board is put in place, and at that time, the new board has the right to either adopt the pre-2017 bylaws or the revised ones. Now, you might not have you might find that it's the current people who are just elected because they're the only ones who run. Well, that's fine. If that's what happens, well, then that legitimizes at the very least. Another thing that needs to happen is an independent auditor needs to be appointed to review the accounts with ledgers from 2017 to present to be published and sent to members prior to the special meeting. So what you would do is immediately you would get an independent auditor. They've got a month, and I'd imagine the accounts aren't going to be overly complicated. There's not going to be a lot of outgoings. We're not talking about anything too complex. It's going to be a fairly simple accounting, and especially if they've already kept the accounts, it's just someone to go in and confirm what it is, and these get published. Now, these need to be published prior to the voting taking place. So essentially, you've got you would hope that it would be in a month, but at least if it's in 6 weeks, that way it gives people the opportunity to make an informed decision. Really, it's all pretty simple. What this does is a couple of things. The first thing is by reinstating all the members from 2017, you increase your membership overnight. So most organizations, if they see that it's being addressed, they're probably going to want to have a vote or have a say, or at least see what happens. Now, once all of this voting has happened, the reinstated members will have the option after the meeting to either continue as members or revoke their membership. If they want to remain, it's just a $1 membership fee until the end of the year. And then after that time, whatever the appropriate amount that the new board determines is the amount they pay, and hopefully they can move on. But I mean, you increase your membership instantly, especially with international affiliates. Now, if they don't want to be involved, they're not involved, and that's a decision they make. And hopefully, with a new board, they might be able to convince a few of these organizations to come back into the fold at some point. But hopefully what it does is it gives legitimacy to the organization. It says that, yes, we acknowledge, and whether we say, that something right or wrong happened 5 years ago, at least they're saying, look, we're acknowledging there's a controversy. It's something that we acknowledge needs to be addressed. We're acknowledging that this is a solution that should be a win-win for everyone, and we're acknowledging that we all want to move forward. I think it's pretty straightforward. I'd be very interested to know, I guess, see what people think, but it doesn't need to be complicated. It really doesn't need to be complicated. It's just a matter of reinstating previous membership, holding a vote. Very simple. So let me know what you all think. Be very interested to see in the comments below if you think it's something that could work. Unfortunately, I don't think it's anything that's going to happen. I think it's going to be business as usual for AAI. We'll see what happens. I have seen a question come through from Bearded Heretic. How do we get an organisation which has actively removed democratic processes to engage in a democratic process to improve things? Look, the reality is I don't. It's as much as I would like to see this happen. I think it's wishful thinking. John Hamill said 2017 bylaws should govern the meeting, not current. I would agree with that. I think that would be something that would need to be conceded, that the 2017 bylaws will be adopted for the purposes of the meeting, and then afterwards the newly elected board can determine which bylaws they wish to take on. So look, that's my thought. I think I think at least if we can get a conversation happening, we could go. So we've got another question come through. Sorry, it's a repost. Sorry, I missed it. Would there not need to be a screening for inappropriate membership as well at some point? Non-organisations, for instance. Yes, I think there would need to be. I think that there's some organisations that are essentially one-person blogs that are listed on AAI, or non-existent organisations, or political organisations. Look, I think that is something that would need to be dealt with, but for the sake of this meeting, I think you would just have to accept that whoever they've got counted as an affiliate at today is an affiliate. Whether that's right or wrong, that's for the new board to determine. If it was me, I would have different types of memberships. I wouldn't have a blog as a member unless they were something where there was a multiple people involved in it. It had a democratic process and actually did things within the community. I mean, look, what I do here is essentially blogger talk on screen. I'm not an atheist organization by any means, and I wouldn't want to have the same voting rights or affiliate status as say a group like Atheist Island or American Atheists, because it wouldn't be appropriate for me to. So yeah, I think that is something that would need to be addressed at some point. But I think that's something for down the track. I think that's definitely for consideration with a new board. And look, there's a lot that the new board would have to take on. I've had a question: what about Canadian atheists? I have an opinion about Canadian atheists. I really do. Which I'll preface by saying I don't like Randolph. I think the guy's a dickhead. And I don't really know if his organization is an organization or whether it's just him as a blog. But I think you would have to, at the very least, recognize that. See, I don't know enough about what Canadian atheists supposedly do. From what I can see, I think it's just Randolph as a one-man show, with a few people who join up as a member, but it is essentially Randolph's business, from what I can see. And I could be wrong. But in my opinion, I don't think it's necessarily an actual atheist organization that does anything on the ground. But I think you would have to have some kind of standard set for what is an atheist organization. But once again, that would be something for the new board to determine. At the moment, Canadian atheists are listed as an organization that's an affiliate, so you would give them the voting right. But yeah, look, I probably shouldn't let my personal opinion on Randolph get in the way. But yeah, I would imagine that. Yeah, I probably shouldn't go there. The last thing I need is another feud with Randolph. It would bore me to sleep having to put up with that. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. Look, if anyone did have any thoughts, or I guess if you think I'm wrong on what I suggested, if you have better ideas, definitely chuck them in the comment section. It will be this is a bit of a short one today, just a half hour sort of video. I don't really think there's too much more that needs to sort of be said about this. AI is a shit show. It needs to be fixed. We need a strong international atheist organization. I don't have a lot of confidence that's going to happen, but I can always be hopeful, I guess. I think realistically, the best thing we can do is we can get people involved in the current version of AAI and have them stand and have people put on the board that are prepared to make these changes. And maybe that's something I'll consider. If they're taking blogs, maybe I register hereticals and see what happens as an affiliate. And even though I don't think it should be, maybe I'll look at getting myself in a position where we do that. Bearded Heretic has said, I think there needs to be an expose on a few different organizations. There appears to be somewhat of a theme. Don't know who will do that though. I think Claire would be a very good person to do a bit of an expose on some of these organizations. See, I think this is an issue. I mean, you can call yourself anything. I could register an organization tomorrow called Australian Atheists. That could be a business registered in my name with an ABN or a business registration, I guess, in Australia, and then parade myself as if I'm some organization representing atheists when in fact I wouldn't be. It'd just be a one-man show. I think I think there's a lot of well-intentioned people who don't necessarily have the skills to run organizations. And look, I think despite my differences with Randolph, I think he's well-intentioned, but I don't really think he does a lot from what I can see. And look, I could be wrong. And if I'm wrong, I have no doubt that Randolph will do a rant and correct things. But and I don't want to keep going back to him as the example. I think there's a lot of organizations that are essentially one or two people sort of shows, or it's something that's been registered at some point where it's well intentioned, but it's never really taken off, and it's just kind of sitting there, And once again, and I think that's where organizations like Atheist Alliance International are really important, because I mean they've got the infrastructure, they've got the specialization to help organizations be able to expand and grow. But I think if you're going to have an organization that represents any group, it has to be done right. You've got to have correct things in place. It can't be you set up the organization and it's your little fiefdom. You rule it forever. It has to be an organization that's democratically run, where I think if you set up an organization, you have to be prepared to accept that you could be voted out of that organization. But that's not why you start it. You don't start it for your own self-glory. You start these organizations to make a difference. Anyway, a lot of thoughts there. I like that Seamus is the president in exile. bit of a Charles de Gaulle, maybe. I quite like that. And look, I agree. I really do hope AAI can be saved, because, like I keep saying, we need AAI. We genuinely need organizations like AAI to to represent us, to represent I guess what is technically the third largest religious position in the world. Well, listed religious position. I think we're actually bigger than the numbers would indicate. But obviously, there's places where people can't say they're an atheist, or they just don't count as atheists. We need that representation, but it needs to be done right. It can't just be what it is now, because what it is now isn't democratic. It has legitimacy issues, and it seems to be refusing to address them. So anyway, there's solutions. We can sit back about it and just complain and jump up and down and get nothing done, or we can do something about it. I've made my suggestion as to what needs to happen. I'm going to definitely consider joining the current version of AAI and maybe nominating for a position, just so we can get a voice in to try and legitimize the organization. That's my thoughts anyway. So thank you everyone for coming along and listening to me rant for 30 minutes. It's always fun. As I said, any ideas, suggestions, throw them in the comments down below. If you're new to the channel here, please give us a subscribe. There's normally not these long rants that we do. We try and have a bit of fun on the channel. It's normally a bit of a podcast sort of chat style show. But I think for something like this, I did want to give it a somewhat serious approach. Anyway, wherever you are on this beautiful planet, have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, or whatever it is, wherever you are. Catch you all later.